You wake up before the rest of the house. You run alone. You read instead of scroll. You process things internally before you respond, sometimes for days. You protect your mornings like they're the only hours that still belong to you because they might be. And you're selective about who gets real access to your time, your attention, your actual presence. People have called all of this boring, cold, antisocial, rigid, stuck in your head. And if you've been living this way for years, nobody has ever sat you down and explained with actual science why every single one of these habits is doing something measurable to your brain. Today, that changes. For most people, the stimulation loop starts before consciousness does. Phone in hand before fully awake. Notifications before coffee. Someone else's opinion before their own first thought. The dopamine architecture of a normal morning is engineered around someone else's attention, and it compounds across the entire day. Every interruption resets the clock. Every scroll trades depth for novelty. Every background podcast fills the space where the brain would have done something else. And by the time most people sit down to do something that actually requires them, something that needs sustained attention, clear memory, and the ability to hold complexity, they've already spent the best hours of their cognition on things that gave nothing back. The tank is down before the work starts. That's not a character flaw. Those loops are built to be compelling. They represent some of the most sophisticated behavioral engineering in human history. But there's a subset of people whose wiring resisted them, some early, some gradually, some without making a deliberate decision. They just found themselves pulled toward quiet over noise, toward depth over novelty, toward routines that don't require an audience to mean something. And over time, their brains adapted to reflect exactly that. Here's what that adaptation looks like in neuroscience. The first habit most people write off as personality quirk. You run, you lift, you move your body alone early without making anything of it. No post, no tracker shared with friends, no community challenge. You just go and you come back and you get on with the day. People at work notice something is different about you, steadier under pressure, less reactive in the moments that break. Other people quicker to return to clarity after something hard. They don't see the 5 a.m. They don't see the 100 mornings of rain and bad weeks and no motivation that it took to build what you have now. They just notice the result and sometimes call it intimidating or cold or hard to rattle. And they're not wrong that something is different. Dr. John Rady at Harvard Medical School spent years studying what exercise actually does to the brain, not to the body, to the brain specifically. He found that aerobic exercise raises levels of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein that literally grows new neurons and strengthens the synaptic connections between existing ones. Rady called it miracle grow for the brain, not as a metaphor. The tissue changes. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for decision-making impulse control, working memory, and handling complex information under stress, physically adapts to the cognitive load you're putting on it when you train consistently. Speed improves. Resilience under pressure improves. The capacity to think clearly when everything else is demanding your attention improves. What you're building in those early hours isn't just cardiovascular fitness. It's cognitive infrastructure, and you've been laying it quietly for years. One guy on a deadline-heavy project team had been waking up at 5 a.m. to run for nearly a decade. His coworkers called him off. No after-work drinks, no late starts, no exceptions, not holidays, not bad weather, not hard weeks. When a critical crunch hit and the pressure compounded over 3 straight days, he was the only one still thinking with any real clarity by day 3. The others were functional. He was operating. A younger colleague pulled him aside and asked quietly, "How are you still like this right now?" He didn't have a speech. He said, "I run." That was the whole answer. No elaboration needed. If this is the first time someone has put this into words for you, follow for more on the psychology of quiet intensity. There's more where this comes from. The second habit is one people fight you on socially. You leave early. You've been doing it for years. Work events, dinners, late nights that stretch past the point they should. You know when you're done and you go. People have called you rigid, antisocial, old before your time. One person probably told you once you were no fun. You felt the pressure, acknowledged it, and left anyway. And they're not wrong that you're choosing something different from what the room expects. Matthew Walker at UC Berkeley has spent his career studying what happens inside the brain during sleep and what happens specifically when it's cut short consistently over time. During deep sleep, the brain runs a maintenance cycle most people never think about. It consolidates memories from the day, encoding the ones worth keeping and pruning the ones that aren't. It strips unnecessary synaptic connections to make the essential pathways faster and more efficient. It clears metabolic waste products through the glymphatic system, a process that only operates at full capacity during sleep, and which, when disrupted consistently, has been linked to long-term cognitive decline. Sacrifice that cycle regularly, and you don't just feel tired. Your brain's ability to encode new information degrades. Decision quality drops in ways you literally cannot detect. Subjectively, you feel fine, but your performance data says otherwise. The costs compound slowly, quietly, in directions that don't announce themselves until they're hard to reverse. Your system knows what it needs. It has been telling you for years. Every early exit wasn't antisocial. Every early exit was a deposit into something the people still at the table haven't thought about yet. The third habit gets you called checked out. Emotionally unavailable, hard to reach. You're physically present in a conversation and somehow still processing something that has nothing to do with what's in front of you. People want full engagement, eye contact, follow-up questions, visible investment, and they can tell they're getting something less. Not hostility, not disinterest exactly, just the clear sense that part of you is elsewhere running something they can't see. They take it personally. Sometimes they say so. They're not wrong that you're somewhere else. Researchers at the University of British Columbia found that the brain's default mode network, the system that activates specifically when you're not focused on a defined external task, is responsible for some of the highest order cognitive work the brain does. Drawing connections between disparate ideas, processing experiences that weren't fully resolved in the moment they happen, generating the kind of insight that can't be forced during active concentration and never arrives on command. It requires one specific condition, unstructured mental time with no competing input claiming the space. The people who protect that internal space aren't absent. They're not emotionally unavailable by nature. They're running a process that the most constantly stimulated people around them have crowded out entirely. Some problems need background runtime. Some connections only surface when you stop reaching for them. Your brain has been doing this work in the margins for years, in the car, on walks, in the 15 minutes before sleep. You probably didn't have a name for it. Now you do. The fourth habit gets you called behind the times. Quietly eccentric. Possibly pretentious. Your peers consume information in clips, summaries, highlights 3-paragraph versions of things that used to take chapters. They've been meaning to read more for 6 years, and they'll mean to for 6 more. You're the one who actually finishes books hard. Ones, long ones. Ones that require you to stay with something past the point where every other option would be easier. In most social circles, that's become something people notice and don't quite know what to do with. A polite curiosity. Occasionally a mild mockery. Rarely an understanding of what it's building. They're not entirely wrong that you've diverged from where most people landed. Neuroscientists at Emory University found in 2013 that reading literary fiction, not summaries, not articles, not 3-minute explainers, but sustained long-form reading, where you stay inside something for an extended period, activates and strengthens neural pathways associated with language processing, abstract reasoning, and the ability to accurately model other people's internal states. The cognitive networks it builds are the same ones that support complex thought, clear communication, and precision under pressure. Deep reading is resistance training for the mind. It builds the kind of mental endurance that doesn't degrade. Gracefully, it either gets maintained or it quietly atrophies. And most people don't notice it's gone until they need it. Every book you finished when you could have done something easier was a rep. You've been in the gym. But here's the question I need you to sit with before we go further. Some of these habits are real discipline years of consistent investment in how your mind works, maintained when nobody asked you to. And some of them might be avoidance wearing discipline's clothes. Staying inside books because conversation costs more than it gives back right now. Running alone because managing another person's energy sounds impossible today. Building an elaborate morning routine because it feels like control when other things don't. Protecting solitude because intimacy is harder than quiet. Both feel principled from the inside. Both look identical from the outside. Only you know which habit is which, and if you're being honest with yourself, some of them might be both things at once. The fifth habit is about what you don't do. You don't check your phone every few minutes, refreshing out of reflex, monitoring reactions, tracking in real time, what people think of you, or whether anyone responded. You let messages sit. You don't perform constant availability. People sometimes read this as arrogance or indifference, or the particular kind of distance that makes them wonder whether they register to you at all. Maybe you've wondered at some point if they had a point. Dr. Gloria Mark at UC Irvine has spent years measuring what digital interruptions actually do to cognitive function. Not what people believe they do, but what the data shows when you track it carefully. Her research found that after a single interruption, one notification, one tab switch, one glance at a message to see who it was, the average person takes over 23 minutes to return to a fully focused cognitive state. Not to the task, to the state required to do the task at the level they're actually capable of. And most people interrupt themselves dozens of times daily. They are never fully inside anything. They've normalized a cognitive experience that is measured objectively a significant fraction of what their brains could be doing if the conditions were different. Every time you protect your attention from that cycle, you're not opting out of something harmless. You're preserving the neurological condition your brain needs to think at its ceiling. Not arrogance, not indifference. That's what depth costs, and you've been paying that cost correctly for a long time. The sixth habit makes people think you're stuck. You process things by writing them down. You stay with an experience longer than most people stay with anything, turning it over, finding the exact words for what happened, what it meant, what you actually think about it. Now that the noise has cleared, other people have moved on. They've filed the experience and started the next thing. You're still in it. Not because you can't let go, but because your brain isn't finished. They're not wrong that you dwell where most people don't. Cyan Baylock at the University of Chicago found that expressive writing translating difficult or high-stakes experiences into words literally offloads cognitive and emotional weight from working memory, freeing up bandwidth that was being consumed by unresolved material. Her research showed measurable improvement in performance under pressure after writing about the source of anxiety, not talking about it, not thinking harder about it, but writing it out specifically. Separately, James Pennebaker at the University of Texas at Austin found that sustained expressive writing improved long-term psychological processing and immune function in ways that rumination alone thinking without writing did not produce. The act of converting experience to language forces a kind of structure the brain finds genuinely useful. You weren't stuck. You were running a cognitive process most people skip entirely, and then they wonder why the same things keep affecting them the same ways. Your brain stayed with it because it wasn't finished. That's not weakness. That's precision. The seventh habit is the one that gets you misread most. You're selective. You don't extend yourself to everyone. You have a short list of people who get real access, real conversation, real time, real presence, and beyond that list, you're pleasant enough, but you don't invest. People have read this as cold, guarded, deliberately withholding. Some have taken it personally as though the filter were a statement about their worth. They're not wrong that most people don't make the list. Nicholas Christakis at Yale has spent years studying how social networks shape biology, not mood or personality in abstract terms, but measurable physiological and cognitive outcomes. His research found that the people you spend consistent time with don't just influence your behavior or your habits. They influence your neural patterns, your baseline stress levels, your cognitive defaults, and the quality of mental environment you're living in daily. The minds around you shape your own mind, not metaphorically, but in terms of what your brain is adapting to over time. Selectivity about who you let inside that environment isn't coldness, it's curation. You've been managing the conditions your brain develops in the same way you manage sleep, movement, attention. Most people let that environment happen to them by default. You chose it. That's a different kind of discipline, quieter, less visible, and rarely understood for what it actually is. If you're a man who's been running these habits for years, you probably did it without making anything of it. No morning routine content, no reading list, no discipline post, no announcement that you were doing something intentional. You woke up, moved, processed, read, protected your attention, and got on with it quietly, consistently for a long time. And now you're sitting in rooms where people around you are operating on fragmented, sleepful notification access, no internal quiet, no deep processing, no real filter on who they give their time to. You are the one they can't quite read, the one who's still thinking clearly when the pressure compounds, the one who doesn't look like what the situation is doing to everyone else. You can feel the difference. You have felt it for years. You don't say anything about it. You don't have to. The work was done in private. The result doesn't need explaining. The difference was never the advice. Everyone's heard the advice. The difference is in what you did during the hours nobody was watching, and what you kept doing when there was nothing and no one to make it feel worth it. Your brain didn't get where it is by accident. You built it slowly, quietly, every day. Which of these habits have you been running with the longest? Drop it in the comments. I want to know which one came first. And if you know someone who's been quietly building this way for years, never talking about it, just doing it, send this to them. Sometimes just having the science behind what you already know changes something.